I don't want you here. You need to go there. I've made all the arrangements.
When?
Tomorrow morning.
The carriage that took Isadora Drummond to Ashwell Manor left Drummond House at 6 in the morning, which was early enough that most of London was still dark and the street outside was empty of witnesses. Crispin had arranged this deliberately. He was a man who understood the social architecture of observation, who saw what, when, and what the seeing produced in terms of talk. And he had calculated that a departure at 6 in the morning in late November would be absorbed into the general darkness of the season without producing the kind of comment that a more visible removal might have generated. He had also arranged it without telling Isadora until the previous evening. She had come down to dinner and found him already seated and had sat across from him, and they had eaten the first 2 courses in the silence that had been their primary mode of communication since August, when the conversation that had ended the functional part of their marriage had taken place in this same dining room. Between the second and third courses, he had told her that he had arranged for her to spend the remainder of her confinement at Ashwell, which was the Drummond estate in Northamptonshire, and that she would be comfortable there and well attended, and that the arrangement was for her health and the health of the child. She had looked at him. She was 7 months pregnant. She had been managing the symptoms of the pregnancy without complaint across the previous months, which Crispin had attributed to good constitution, and which was actually the result of a woman who had decided, sometime around the 4th month, that complaining to a man who was not paying attention was a waste of energy that could be directed elsewhere. "Ashwell," she said. "The air will be better," he said. "The city is not ideal for a confinement. Ashwell has been unoccupied for 3 years," she said. "The heating system requires repair. I read the steward's report in September. I have made arrangements for the heating," he said. This was partially true. He had sent a letter to the Ashwell steward. Whether the heating arrangements were in place was not something he had verified. She looked at him for a moment with the expression she had been using for the past 3 months, which was an expression he had initially categorized as resigned, and had later, when he had thought about it more carefully, which was after she had left when there was time to think, understood was not resigned at all, but was the expression of a woman who is watching a situation very carefully and saying very little while she watches. "When?" she said. "Tomorrow morning." She had gone back to her dinner and eaten the 3rd course and the 4th, and had said nothing further about Ashwell, which he had taken as acceptance and which was not acceptance. Before we continue, subscribe now, and tell me in the comments when a pregnant woman is told the night before that she will be removed to an unoccupied estate 6 hours away, and she simply asks and goes back to her dinner. What is she actually doing in that silence? She was remembering. Specifically, she was remembering a conversation she had had with her father's solicitor, Mr. Edmund Harlow, in the month before her wedding. The conversation had been about the Drummond entail, the legal instrument that governed how the Drummond estate and title passed from one generation to the next, and it had been a conversation that Harlow had initiated on her father's instruction, which was the instruction of a man who had spent 30 years as a county magistrate and had seen enough of how these arrangements could go wrong to believe that his daughter should understand the specific terms of the arrangement she was entering. The entail, Harlow had explained, was unusual in one respect. Most entails of this kind passed the estate and title strictly through the male line, with no conditions attached to the manner of the heir's birth beyond legitimacy. The Drummond entail had an additional clause added by Crispin's grandfather, which was a man who had apparently had his own experiences with estranged family members and disputed residencies. The clause stated that for an heir to be recognised under the entail, the child must have been born legitimate, and the mother must have been residing, at the time of birth, in a property that was recognised as part of the Drummond estate holdings. This meant Drummond House in London. It meant Ashwell Manor in Northamptonshire. It meant the 3 other properties that appeared in the estate register. It did not mean a rented house. It did not mean her father's property. It did not mean any arrangement that was not formally recognised as part of the Drummond holdings. When Crispin told her she was going to Ashwell, he had, without knowing it, solved a problem she had been thinking about since August. August was when she had learned about Eleanor Voss. Eleanor was 23 and the daughter of a baronet, and she had been receiving letters from Crispin for approximately 4 months, and visits for approximately 2, which Isadora had established through the kind of systematic attention to household details that a woman develops when she has reason to pay it. She had not confronted Crispin with this information. She had filed it, in the way she filed most things, and had continued thinking about what it meant and what she was going to do about it. What she was going to do about it was complicated by the pregnancy, which had been confirmed in July and which changed the arithmetic of her situation in ways she had been working through since. What Crispin was going to do about it was less complicated, which was becoming clear across September and October as the visits to Eleanor became less discreet and the conversations at dinner became shorter, and the marriage began to acquire the texture of something that was being wound down toward a conclusion rather than managed toward a future. She had spoken to Harlow in October without telling Crispin. She had gone to Harlow's office in Gray's Inn on a Tuesday when Crispin was in the country, and had laid out, with the organised directness that she had inherited from her father, the situation as she understood it and the questions she needed answered. Harlow had answered her questions. His answers had covered the annulment provisions available to Crispin, which required grounds she had not provided and which would therefore be slow and expensive. The inheritance position of any child born legitimate during the marriage, which was governed by the entail clause she remembered, and the specific conditions under which that clause applied. She had gone home and had continued managing the household with the same attention she had been bringing to it for 2 years of marriage, and she had been waiting, when the November dinner came, for Crispin to make a decision that would clarify the direction of things. The decision he made was to send her to Ashwell, which was a Drummond property, which satisfied the entail clause, which meant that whatever child she was carrying, if it was a son, would be born at a recognised Drummond estate, and would be the legal heir to everything Crispin was attempting to reorganise his life without. She had finished her dinner and gone upstairs and packed what she wanted to take, which was a considered selection based on what she expected the next several months to require. She had also written a letter to Harlow, which she sent with the first morning post before the carriage arrived. The carriage took her to Ashwell in 5 hours. The heating arrangements were not complete. She arrived at a house that was cold in the rooms that did not have fireplaces, and inadequately warm in the rooms that did. And she assessed the situation with the equanimity of a woman who has been thinking about this arrival for several weeks and has decided how to manage it. She asked the steward, a man named Hobbs who had been managing Ashwell in its unoccupied state for 3 years, and who received her arrival with the careful attention of someone adjusting quickly to a changed situation for the full state of the property and its resources. Hobbs gave her an honest account, which she appreciated. The heating system required a specific part that had not been ordered yet. The kitchen was functional. The staff was skeleton, 4 people who had been maintaining the property, but could be supplemented from the village if required. The estate farms were productive, but had been managed without much direction for 3 years, and could do with attention. "Thank you," she said. "Can you order the heating part today?" "Yes, my lady. And I'll need to review the farm accounts this week." "Not urgently, when you have time to walk me through them." Hobbs looked at her with the expression of a man recalibrating his understanding of what the next months would look like. "Of course, my lady." She settled in. The word settle does not fully capture what she did, which was more active than settling. She organised, she reviewed, she made decisions. She built relationships with the Ashwell staff, and the village vicar, and the tenant farmers, and the local doctor who would attend the birth. She was 7 months pregnant, and she managed the cold and the inconvenience with the practical attention of someone who has identified a situation and is working with what it offers, rather than mourning what it lacks. The heating part arrived in December. By Christmas the manor was warm. She also, in the first weeks at Ashwell, began keeping a journal. Not a diary in the personal sense, more a record. Dates, observations, decisions made, people spoken to. The kind of record that a woman keeps when she understands that documentation has a function beyond memory. Before we continue, subscribe now and tell me in the comments if you were sent to a cold, unoccupied manor, 7 months pregnant, and you arrived and immediately asked for the heating repair and the farm accounts. What does that tell you about the kind of woman Isadora Drummond was, and what she had already understood about her situation? The boy was born on the 14th of January at Ashwell Manor, in a bedroom that had been made properly warm and properly equipped through Isadora's systematic management of the previous 6 weeks. He was delivered by Dr. Aldred from the village, witnessed by Hobbs the steward, and by Mrs. Finch the housekeeper, both of whom signed their names to the birth record, along with Dr. Aldred. The birth record noted, male child, born legitimate, born at Ashwell Manor, Northamptonshire, which was a property of the Drummond estate. Isadora named him Thomas, which was her father's name. She wrote to Harlow the same day, dictating the letter to Mrs. Finch because her own hands were occupied with Thomas. The letter informed Harlow of the birth, the date, the location, and the witnesses. It asked him to register the birth in the appropriate records and to file, with the Drummond family solicitors, a formal notification of the birth of the legitimate Drummond heir. Harlow filed the notification within the week. Crispin received it at Drummond House, where he was residing with Eleanor, who had moved in 2 months earlier, with the assumption that the annulment proceedings Crispin had been discussing with his solicitors would conclude in a timeline that would make the arrangement regularizable. He read the notification at his desk. He read it again. He called for his solicitor, a man named Fitch, who had been with the Drummond family for 20 years, and who received the summons with the manner of someone who had been expecting to be summoned on this subject and had prepared accordingly. "The entail," Crispin said. "Yes, my lord." "A son born at Ashwell." "Yes, my lord. The notification is properly filed. The witnesses are credible. The estate steward and the housekeeper, both long-term Drummond staff. Dr. Aldred has an unimpeachable reputation in the county. The annulment proceedings." Fitch was quiet for a moment, in the manner of a man choosing his words with care. "The birth complicates them, my lord. A legitimate son born at a Drummond property, properly witnessed and registered. The entail clause applies without ambiguity. The child is the recognised heir. And Eleanor, any subsequent marriage," Fitch said, with the careful neutrality of a solicitor navigating a subject that has both legal and personal dimensions, "would produce children who would not supersede the legitimate heir already registered." The entail is clear on this point. Crispin sat with this, the situation he had arranged his life around, the annulment, the subsequent marriage to Eleanor, the heir he had been expecting to produce from that marriage, had been reorganised by a birth at an estate he had sent his wife to because he had thought it would be convenient for him, without examining what the convenience would cost. He had sent Isadora to Ashwell because it was a Drummond property and therefore would be credible as a location for a confinement. He had not thought about the entail clause because he had not expected the child to be relevant. He had expected a daughter, which was not based on any information. It was based on the kind of irrational certainty that men who have decided on a course of action sometimes develop regarding the facts that would support it. He had been wrong about the daughter. He wrote to Isadora. The letter was 3 pages, which was the length of a letter, written by a man who has a great deal to manage, and is not yet sure how to manage it. It covered, in order, his congratulations on the birth, his intention to visit Ashwell in the near future, and a series of propositions about the future arrangements of the household that were framed as generous, and were, she would later describe to Harlow, the propositions of a man who has discovered that the ground has shifted and is attempting to stabilise his position on it. She read the letter once. She put it on the desk. She went to feed Thomas, who was 6 days old, and had his grandmother's eyes and his mother's expression of steady, unruffled attention. She wrote back through Harlow. Her reply, which Harlow drafted at her instruction, and which she reviewed and approved and signed, was 2 pages. It covered the following: that she was glad to hear from her husband, that Thomas was in good health, that she would be remaining at Ashwell for the foreseeable future, as Thomas was young and the manor suited them, and that any discussion of future arrangements should go through Mr. Harlow, who was authorised to act on her behalf in all matters relating to the estate, the marriage, and the child's interests. The use of Harlow as intermediary was not a device. It was a statement about the level of formality that she considered appropriate to the situation they were now in, and Crispin, who had been a man of the world long enough to understand formal statements, understood it. He came to Ashwell in February. She received him in the sitting room that she had arranged, in the 2 months since her arrival, into a room that was warm and organised and had on the desk the farm accounts she had been reviewing, and on the side table the journal she had been keeping, and in the chair by the window the shawl she used when she was feeding Thomas. Thomas was in the nursery. She had decided before Crispin arrived that the first conversation should happen without Thomas present, because the presence of a 7-week-old baby altered the emotional dynamics of a conversation in ways she could not predict and did not want to manage on top of everything else. Crispin came in and looked at the room, at the organised desk and the warm fire and the evidence of a household that had been created from an unoccupied manor in 2 months, and had the expression of a man seeing something he had not expected. "You've made it habitable," he said. "I made it functional," she said. "There's a difference." He sat across from him. Outside the sitting room window, the February fields of the Ashwell estate were visible. the fields whose accounts she had reviewed in December, and whose management she had been quietly improving since January, through a series of conversations with the tenant farmers that Hobbs had facilitated. "Thomas," Crispin said, "is well. You can see him before you leave, if you'd like." The phrasing, "before you leave," established the duration of the visit, which was not something she was going to leave open. "I want to discuss the future," he said. "So does Harlow," she said. "I thought it would be more efficient to have that conversation with him present. He can be here Friday if that suits. I wanted to speak with you directly." "I know." She looked at him with the steady, watching expression that he had categorized as resigned and had since recategorized. "Crispin, I think direct conversation between us at this moment is less useful than you imagine it will be. I have a solicitor. You have a solicitor. The situation has legal dimensions that are better managed through people who understand those dimensions than through conversations between two people who have, over the past 6 months, demonstrated that direct conversation between us does not produce its intended results." He looked at her. "That's a cold assessment," he said. "It's an accurate one," she said. "I'm not angry. I want you to understand that. I'm not performing calm over anger. I am calm because I have been thinking about this situation since August, and I understand its shape, and I know what I want from it. And what I want from it is a functional arrangement that is good for Thomas, and that allows me to manage this estate and my own life without ongoing friction. That is not a cold ambition, it is a reasonable one." He was quiet for a moment. "Eleanor," he said, which was the word he had been working towards since he arrived and which she had been waiting for. "Is your business," she said. "Not mine. What is mine is Thomas and Ashwell, and the terms of the arrangement we will reach through Harlow. Eleanor is not part of those terms." "The annulment is not available on the grounds you were hoping to use," she said. "Harlow has reviewed this. Your solicitors know it. The entail is registered. Thomas is the heir, the marriage." She paused. "What is available is a legal separation, which Harlow has already drafted the terms for, which are fair and which I think you will find, when you read them, that they reflect a reasonable understanding of what the situation actually is, rather than what either of us might prefer it to be." Crispin sat across from her in the sitting room of the estate he had sent her to, without expecting her to do anything with it, and looked at the organised desk and the farm accounts, and the journal, and the shawl in the chair by the window, and had, she could see, the specific expression of a man who is understanding, retroactively, a series of decisions he made without understanding them. "You knew," he said, "about the entail when I sent you here." "I knew about the entail before the wedding," she said. "Harlow explained it. My father asked him to." "Your father?" "He was a magistrate for 30 years, she said. "He believed in understanding the legal terms of the arrangements one enters. He passed this belief to me." A pause. "I am glad he did." Crispin looked at the window. "If you had told me—" "I did not know what you were going to do," she said. "I only knew the clause existed. You made the decisions that made the clause relevant." She looked at him steadily. "I did not arrange this, Crispin. I responded to what you arranged." He was quiet for a long time. Thomas made a sound from the nursery, which carried faintly through the sitting-room door, the sound of a 7-week-old boy who had been born at Ashwell Manor, properly witnessed, properly registered, properly entailed, the heir to a situation that had arranged itself around him without his knowledge or consent, which was, Isadora thought, how most people arrived at their inheritances. "I would like to see him," Crispin said. "Of course," she said. "Come." She took him to the nursery, which was the warmest room in the manor, and which she had arranged with the same attention she had brought to everything at Ashwell. Thomas was in the arms of the nurse, who stepped back when they entered to give them space. Crispin looked at his son. Thomas looked back at him, with the steady, unruffled attention that was apparently a Harlow family quality, rather than a Drummond one, which Isadora had noticed and found quietly satisfying. "He has your father's eyes," Crispin said. "Yes," she said. "He does." They stood in the nursery for a while. The February light came through the window. The heating system worked correctly, which it had since December when the part arrived. "The separation terms," Crispin said after a while. "Harlow will send them next week," she said. "Read them properly. He has been fair." "And Ashwell?" She looked at him. This was the question she had been expecting, and the one she had thought about the most carefully. "Ashwell suits Thomas," she said. "He will grow up knowing the estate. He will understand how it works." A pause. When he is old enough, he will make his own decisions about it. Until then, I will manage it. She looked at the window at the February fields. I have been managing it. The farm accounts are better than they were. The heating works. The tenant relationships are in better order than the steward's report from September suggested. She paused. I find I am good at this. My father's influence, I expect. Crispin nodded. He looked at Thomas again, who had fallen asleep with the profound commitment of a 7-week-old who has decided that the current moment requires unconsciousness. He will know who his father is, Crispin said. He will know the accurate version, she said, which was the most honest answer available, and which she delivered without cruelty, because cruelty was expensive, and she had other things to do with her energy. Crispin left on the afternoon carriage. She went back to the desk and the farm accounts and finished the review she had been doing before his arrival. Hobbs came in at 4 to discuss the spring planting, and she discussed it with him for 40 minutes and made 3 decisions about it, all of which Hobbs thought were sound, which she filed in the journal alongside the date and the subject, and the decisions and the reasoning. Thomas woke at 5, and she fed him in the chair by the window, with the shawl around both of them, looking at the February fields of the Ashwell estate. The fields whose accounts were better, whose tenants were in better order, whose heating worked. She had been at Ashwell for 12 weeks. She had been preparing for Ashwell, in one way or another, since the conversation with Harlow before her wedding. The letter from Harlow came the following Thursday. The separation terms had been reviewed by Crispin's solicitor and accepted with 2 minor amendments, both of which were reasonable and which Harlow had already anticipated and had built the flexibility to accept. She signed the terms on a Friday morning, with Thomas in the room, because she saw no reason to remove him. Hobbs witnessed her signature. Mrs. Finch witnessed it. They were good witnesses, as they had been good witnesses before. The spring planting went well. Thomas sat up on his own for the first time in June, in the chair by the sitting-room window, in the warm room that had been cold when they arrived and which had not been cold since December. He looked at the fields with the steady, unruffled attention that he had apparently inherited from his maternal grandfather, and Isadora watched him looking at them and thought that the fields would be his one day, and that the fields were in better order than they had been, and that the order had been put there by someone who understood, from the time of a pre-wedding conversation with a solicitor in Gray's Inn, that understanding the legal terms of the arrangements you enter is a form of preparation, and that preparation is a form of power. And that power, when it is built quietly and used wisely, tends to outlast the arrangements that gave other people reason to underestimate the person who built it. She went back to the farm accounts. The spring planting figures were good. She made a note.